Look around you for a moment. At the device you're watching this on, at the building you're in, at the very idea of the country you live in, or the money in your bank account. None of it is truly natural. So how did we get here? How did one insignificant species of ape, just one of at least 6 different human species roaming the earth, living in a forgotten corner of Africa, become the undisputed master of the entire planet? In his epic and mind-altering book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, the historian Yuval Noah Harari takes us on a 70,000-year journey to answer that question. This is not a typical history book, filled with the names of kings and the dates of battles. It is a work of big-picture philosophical history. It is the story of 3 great revolutions that made us who we are today. And at its heart is one single explosive idea, an idea that explains everything from the construction of the pyramids to the creation of the modern corporation. And that idea is this: the secret to the power of Homo sapiens is our unique, and frankly, very strange ability to create and believe in things that are not real. This is the story of how fictions, how imagined realities created the world we now inhabit. For most of our history, we weren't that special. 100,000 years ago, if you were a zebra on the African savanna, you were probably more scared of the lions than you were of the strange, upright apes. We were a middle-of-the-food chain animal, just trying to get by. But then, somewhere around 70,000 years ago, something happened. A change in our brains, a sort of cognitive Big Bang, that Harari calls the cognitive revolution. This is the first and most important revolution in our story. It wasn't that our tools got much better or that we suddenly got stronger. The change was in our language. Other animals can communicate, of course. A monkey can shout, "Danger, a lion," to warn its troop. This is communication about things that are real, things you can see and touch. But the unique trick of Sapiens language is that we can talk about things that do not exist at all. We can talk about tribal spirits, about ancient ancestors, about legends, about gods. This ability to speak about fictions is our superpower. Harari argues that this is the single most important thing that separates us from all other animals. A chimpanzee, our closest living relative, cannot convince thousands of other chimps to cooperate on building a giant temple by promising them a limitless supply of bananas in chimp heaven. But humans can. This ability to create and share imagined realities or social constructs is what allows us to cooperate in massive, flexible numbers. Think about a modern corporation like Google or Ford. What is a corporation? You can't see it or touch it. It's not a physical thing, it is a legal fiction, a story that we have all agreed to believe in. And because we all believe in this story, millions of strangers all over the world can cooperate effectively to design, build and sell cars or search engines. The same is true for nations. A country is not the physical land, it is a shared story, a belief in a common identity, a common history, and a common destiny. The same is true for human rights. Human rights do not exist in any objective biological sense. They are a beautiful and powerful story that we have collectively chosen to believe is true. This is the secret to our success. While other animals can only cooperate in small, tight-knit groups based on personal familiarity, sapiens can cooperate in groups of millions, all because we are united by a shared belief in the same stories. The cognitive revolution was the moment we became the storytelling animal. And in doing so, we began the process of creating a new second layer of reality on top of the physical one. The reality of myths, of gods, of nations, and of money. This new imagined reality would prove to be more powerful than any physical force on the planet. For tens of thousands of years after the cognitive revolution, sapiens lived as hunter-gatherers. Our lives were, for the most part, varied, interesting, and relatively comfortable. We worked fewer hours than the average modern office worker, we had a more diverse and nutritious diet, and we were less prone to infectious diseases. But then, starting around 12,000 years ago, we began to make a change that would alter the course of history forever. We began to domesticate plants and animals. We settled down. This was the agricultural revolution. And in one of the most provocative arguments in the book, Harari calls it history's biggest fraud. From a certain perspective, the revolution was a huge success for our species as a whole. The ability to produce more food per acre led to a massive population explosion. The number of humans on the planet skyrocketed. But for the average individual person, Harari argues, life got significantly worse. Farming was much harder work than hunting and gathering. It meant long, back-breaking days of plowing, weeding, and carrying water. The diet of an early farmer was far less varied and nutritious than that of a hunter-gatherer. They were often subsisting on a single staple crop like wheat or rice, which led to vitamin deficiencies. And living in permanent, crowded settlements, surrounded by their own waste and their domestic animals, created the perfect breeding ground for infectious diseases. Even more, the agricultural revolution created a new kind of psychological burden: anxiety about the future. A hunter-gatherer didn't worry too much about next week. The forest would provide. But a farmer's entire life was a gamble on the future. They had to worry constantly about the weather, about droughts, about floods, about pests. The future became a source of immense stress. So why did we do it? Harari offers a fascinating and humbling perspective. He says we need to look at it from the point of view of the wheat. 12,000 years ago, wheat was just a wild grass, confined to a small region in the Middle East. Today, it is one of the most successful plants on the entire planet. It has manipulated Homo sapiens to serve its own reproductive interests. We cleared the forests, we moved the rocks, we spent our days tending to its needs, we spread its seeds to every continent. The question Harari asks is a profound one. Did we domesticate wheat, or did wheat domesticate us? The agricultural revolution in this telling was a deal with the devil. It gave our species the power of numbers, but it condemned the vast majority of individuals to a life of harder work, poorer health, and greater anxiety. It also created the concepts of property, of social hierarchies, of kings and peasants, of slavery and war over land. It was, Harari argues, a trap. And it's a trap we are still living in today. After the agricultural revolution, human societies became larger and more complex. But for thousands of years, they were still mostly separate worlds. A person living in China and a person living in Mesoamerica might as well have been on different planets. The third part of Sapiens is the story of how these separate worlds were slowly but surely woven together into the single interconnected global civilization we know today. Harari argues that this unification was driven by the rise of three great universal imagined orders. These are stories so powerful and so appealing that they were able to transcend local cultures and unite massive numbers of people. The first and perhaps most successful of these is money. Money, Harari points out, is a purely psychological invention. A dollar bill or a gold coin has no intrinsic value. You can't eat it, you can't drink it. Its value exists only in our collective imagination. But it is the one story that almost every human on earth believes in. A Christian and a Muslim who might be willing to kill each other over their religious stories can happily cooperate and trust each other when it comes to a business transaction using a shared story called currency. Money is the most universal and efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. It is the imagined reality that allows for global trade and cooperation between total strangers. The second great unifier was empire. For most of history, politics was a local affair. But empires had a much grander vision. They sought to conquer and govern diverse peoples under a single universal rule. While often brutal and oppressive, empires also acted as massive melting pots. They spread common languages, common laws, and common cultures over vast territories. The idea that all human beings are subject to the same basic laws is, to a large extent, an imperial legacy. And the third great unifier was universal religion. Religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam were revolutionary because they were the first to claim that their truths were universal, that they applied to all people, everywhere. They transcended local gods and tribal allegiances, creating massive transnational communities of believers, a brotherhood of humanity under a single overarching set of laws and values. These three great imagined orders, the economic order of money, the political order of empire, and the spiritual order of universal religion, were the powerful currents that pulled the separate islands of humanity together into a single global continent. For most of human history, our great knowledge systems, like religion, were based on the assumption that we already knew all the important things. The truth was written in a holy book or had been passed down from the ancestors. The goal was not to discover new truths, but to better understand the old ones. But about 500 years ago, a new and revolutionary idea began to take hold in Europe. This was the scientific revolution. And its central driving principle, Harari argues, was not a revolution of knowledge but a revolution of ignorance. The great discovery that launched the modern age was the discovery that we don't know all the answers. It was the willing admission of ignorance. The scientific mindset assumes that our current knowledge is incomplete and probably wrong, and that the only way to get closer to the truth is to make observations, to gather evidence, and to test our theories against reality. This single, humble admission, "I don't know," unleashed an unprecedented and world-changing power. When we admitted we didn't have all the answers, we were suddenly free to start looking for them. This new trust in observation and mathematics combined with new technologies gave us the power to understand and manipulate the world in ways that were previously unimaginable. It gave us medicine, electricity, and the atomic bomb. Harari argues that this new scientific power did not emerge in a vacuum. It was forged in a powerful alliance with the other two great unifiers, empire and money, specifically capitalism. European empires funded scientific expeditions to discover new lands and resources, and the capitalist system, with its belief in future growth, funded scientific research in the hopes of creating new technologies and new profits. This powerful feedback loop between science, empire, and capital is what has created the modern world. It has given us incredible power, a power that has lifted billions out of poverty, but that has also led to ecological devastation and the creation of weapons of mass destruction. The book ends not in the past but by looking at the profound and unsettling questions of our future. For 70,000 years we have been more or less the same animal. Our technology has changed, but our basic biological hardware, our bodies and our brains, has remained constant. But this, Harari argues, is about to change. The same scientific revolution that gave us so much power over the world is now giving us power over our own biology. With the tools of bioengineering, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence, we are on the verge of being able to upgrade ourselves to overcome the limitations of our Darwinian evolution. We may be one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. We are beginning to acquire the powers that we once attributed to the gods, the power of creation and the power of destruction. We are learning to design life. This raises the most profound philosophical questions imaginable. Should we do it? What kind of beings do we want to become? If we can engineer for happiness, or for intelligence, or for longer life, what will that mean for our society and for our sense of what it means to be human? Harari doesn't offer an answer. He ends the book with a single haunting question. We are more powerful than ever before, but we have very little idea what to do with all that power. We are, he says, self-made gods with only the laws of physics to keep us company, and we are accountable to no one. And so he asks, is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied and irresponsible gods who don't know what they want? The ultimate message of Sapiens is a mind-altering one. It reframes our entire understanding of ourselves and our history. It shows us that the world we live in, with all its institutions, its values, and its structures, is built on a foundation of stories. And if stories are what made us, then we have the power and the profound responsibility to write new, wiser, and more compassionate stories for our future. It is a deep inquiry into the very nature of what it means to be human. If that is an inquiry that calls to you, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe and let's continue to explore the big stories that define us.